and look, right, there is the quote-unquote realistic way to think about this, which is, of course, Israel is going to retaliate. The question is just a question of scale. Or you can ask the more obvious moral question here.
Right.
Of if the goal is to end this, how do you end it?
Right.
And a useful question to answer that is to say, how did we get here in the first place?
Yes.
Like, and nobody's willing to go back that extra inch of just asking, what is fundamentally wrong and broken here? So frankly, when people do this gotcha of like, if you were Israel on October 7th, how would you respond?
What would you do?
I honestly don't mind answering that question extremely straightforwardly. Yes, providing all the context of what life was like for Palestinians before October 7th is important, and talking about how Israel has killed far more people in Gaza, like back in 2014 and 2008 and 2009, there have been far bigger massacres that Israel has committed in Gaza, killing infinitely more children than had happened on October 7th even. All of that is important context to understand how we got here. But if somebody were to say, October 7th, what would you have done? You could very easily say the Israeli government should have offered to end the occupation and the siege that is imposed on Palestinians everywhere, end apartheid rule, and demand in return that every single person involved in the killing of civilians on October 7th be turned over for trial.
That's right.
That is a moral position that you can take, in which you're undoing. You're saying nobody gets to get away with something horrible that they have done, but you're also addressing the underlying injustice that keeps us stuck in a situation in which violence is inevitable. It's going to keep happening over and over again. And this delusion that Israel has, that if they just suffocate the Palestinians a little more and brutalize them a little bit more, they're going to bring an end to this. That suffocation and brutalization is the reason why we ended up here in the first place. I mean, this absurdity of putting somebody in a cage and constantly brutalizing them in that cage and saying that's because they're dangerous, and then one day this person escapes that cage and attacks you. They're like, see, that's why I had them in a cage. No, the reason they attacked you is because you had them in prison and brutalized in a cage for this long. That stuff just gets completely overlooked, and it's such a, it seems to be a rather obvious point if people would just bother and make it, as opposed to being stuck in Israel controlling the narrative, and again, back to controlling the framing. Like even somebody like, what's his name? Piers Morgan, who's constantly having a back and forth on this internally and struggling with it, seems to recognize that Israel is behaving awfully towards Palestinians, right? Like he looks at this and says, this is not justified, this is the terrorism that you claim you're fighting against and so on, but still stuck on the idea that surely there had to have been massive retaliation for October 7th as a starting point.